Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back to a strange, weird, and wonderful edition of B2BNAV. Feels somewhat like a sequel. I think that was the way Ollie just described it then before we jumped online with the recording. Yesterday was very much kind of discussing and embracing the fear and some of the issues around the coronavirus and the COVID-19 kind of outbreak and how that might impact businesses and B2B brands going forward. This week, we find ourselves all sat in weird and wonderful remote locations, otherwise known as our homes, as we are attempting to keep up with the podcast and with our content production. And thankfully, at BDB, we embraced a while ago, kind of embracing in technology kit, and I guess a tech stack as well, which we can come on to, which enables us to pretty much seamlessly work from home. I don't know how you guys have found it today with your first. I mean, we work from home all the time, but this felt a bit different today for me. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think I've found I know a lot more about Microsoft Teams than I did yesterday evening. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's been kind of quite a revelation in terms of how robust it is.
Yeah,
and how good it is for multiple working.
It's very different, isn't it, now that it's everybody working from home as opposed to one or two people have chosen to work from home that day.
Yeah, I think the more challenging calls today have been similar to this. I think in a way, I guess when you've got multiple people online, and the difficulty in not speaking over one another at the most basic sense is incredibly difficult.
Yeah,
you find yourself sat there waiting to jump in and then go for it, and then somebody else says something. But it's, I guess that.
But it's interesting because I don't know about you, Matt, but all day today, I've not used video on any of my calls. So this podcast is the first time I've used video.
Yeah.
And it's actually a lot easier to not dive in over the top or kind of cut people off. And there's none of that awkward, oh, no, you go first sort of thing. It's a bit more kind of easy to gauge.
I think a lot of people are just nervous even turning the cameras on the webcams, aren't they, for the calls these days? And the people's default, even at our place, we're used to doing the international calls on a regular basis, would be not to have the camera on. But yeah. I guess, Ollie, let's come to you from the digital standpoint to start with, but in the sense of having the right tech stack or even IT and infrastructure in play, what would you say are the core elements that you think enable that kind of seamless working environment?
Well, I'll throw one out there that I don't think we considered previously, but it's definitely a factor, is how stable are people's home internet connections? Because that's definitely been a factor today, as some people have found out their internet connections aren't that good. Probably not helped by the fact that, everybody else in the UK is also working from home. So I imagine there's more traffic on some of their home connections than they used to.
Yeah.
But I guess going back to business, I mean, the first thing is obviously having something in place to make sure that you can communicate, whether that's Microsoft Teams or Skype or Drift or something, to make sure that you can be in regular contact with teams. You can see when they're online, you can have phone calls, and then realizing that you can use those freely. You don't necessarily have to, when you're talking to your team, you don't necessarily have to schedule time and book a call, and you can just treat it like you're trying to ring them up, or like you would do when you're in the office, which is you'd wander over to people. I think we've got to be careful not to have this barrier in place of like, oh, must schedule a call, because then it is a bit broken down, that communication, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think we're very lucky. I mean, this is a very insular viewpoint, but we've had the capability to do this, and we've kind of, as a business, have been set up to kind of work in this kind of really flexible way for quite a few years now. And it's almost become the norm that people are very comfortable with the process. But I think more importantly is that the start point, which is getting everything on the cloud. So everything's accessible to everyone at any one time.
Yeah, that's true. I
remember when we went through the whole SharePoint process, that for me was the beginning of this journey of being able to really comfortably sit out of the office and still continue and be a viable employee.
Yeah, I guess for us, the SharePoint and the Office 365 was probably the first step in that journey, and then moving along. What's interesting today is, even with Ollie, I've been on several calls with Ollie today, but we've used Skype for business, Zoom, Teams, Slack,
WhatsApp,
Drift, and WhatsApp today. I would say all those platforms have been used in different ways amongst the team, all for different meetings and all with different levels of success, and particularly on the conferencing side of things today. I was amazed how bad Skype was comparatively to the other channels now.
Yeah, it really struggles, doesn't it?
Yeah, but whether Microsoft have done that on purpose, something to encourage you to use Teams. I mean, Teams is so much better in terms of clarity of the audio, even just using the same pieces of kit and so on. So obviously, I think we've used that more than anything today. But as you said, John, I think in terms of having everything centrally accessible on SharePoint, being able to screen share and walk through presentations. But I also think I do think we're a bit lucky in the sense of we are used to working like this with clients internationally.
Yeah.
You know, on a week-to-week basis, a lot of our client correspondence, if we're not on a plane, and we're certainly not at the minute, has to be done via one of these platforms on a regular basis anyway. So it does feel business as usual, other than I wouldn't normally have 8 Teams meetings today, which is how it's kind of felt like.
Yeah, how it's the dice have fallen.
Yeah, and I'm also interested because I suppose it's day one, and for the meantime, none of us really know how long this is going to go on for. Do you think it's sustainable working from home?
I think it's going to be interesting because I've got a couple of things coming up in the next few days that I've never tried to do remotely.
Yeah.
So I've got, in fact, with you actually, we've got some brainstorms. We've got a couple of kind of strategy meetings that require whiteboards, that require actual, scribbling and kicking ideas around.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the virtual whiteboards are going to deal with that and how that'll be. So that'll be quite an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of will it sustain? Yeah, I think as long as, we're not asking it to do anything too outlandish, we should be all right.
Yeah. Ollie, when do you think you'll get cabin fever? I've already got it.
Well, we obviously had our office refurb recently, and I found that after a week of working from home during that, and I was pretty sick of being at home. So I suspect a few days is kind of my ideal limit. But I feel like this might be at least a few weeks, intended at least by government advice. So we'll have to see how it pans out.
Yeah, okay. And I guess the impact on clients going forward, because I think we touched on it, relatively heavily last week in terms of the major impacts on us in the B2B space for the meantime was events, exhibitions, expos, trade shows, whatever name you want to give them these days, all being mainly in the space that we were saying deferred or postponed. And that still seems to be the case. Albeit we've seen one since fully cancelled, haven't we, in the US?
Yeah.
So that went from postponed to cancelled altogether, and they're now putting their efforts into their East Coast show rather than the West Coast was what we were looking at attending at the time. I guess for a lot of clients at the minute, they've got to keep the marketing going. They've got to keep their efforts going, keep their brand awareness, and obviously not attending things like these trade shows and exhibitions is a core part of their calendar, particularly for brand awareness and lead generation, depending on what their purpose or objective is for attending the show. What advice would you have for a client, and I'll come to you in the first case, Ollie, on this one, for diverting spend, thinking differently? Might be putting you on the spot here, it's a big question, but if they're not attending a trade show or a trade show is cancelled, then it arguably might free up some budget. And the ex-accountant in me might say, well, save the budget in a minute because we are operating in quite unknown times. But if not, what other options have clients got at their disposal?
So Handley, I was chatting about this over lunch, and we've already seen clients start asking about this, and we've already started thinking about how this might work. But for me, I think the answer is that really we should be looking at spending that budget digitally, just from the point of view of I'm not going to say that it's the same because there's something about having face-to-face in-person contact, but there are digital methods out there to get out there, to share your message, to get leads, to gain interest. One of which being webinars. That from my point of view, for our clients, I think a lot of them kind of put webinars to some extent on the back seat in the last few years. But we still get great success from webinars. I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago for the amount of time that I put into prepping it and then having people join it. We had something like 200 attendees, so well worth it from the point of view of the amount of time and investment that went into it. So I think there are ways to continue doing it, and I think it just makes sense to kind of channel that money in somewhere else, because I think, like you said, like it's an uncertain time. But if we just down tools, are we going to have less sales and less leads? And that means, business is just going to be down even further than there already is.
Yeah,
in
no,
which case,
I
not
think
helping anybody in the long term.
That's a good point. It's something that Sue Dixon, who used to one of the previous owners of BDB, used to hammer into me of when the first thing in tough times that gets cut is marketing spend, which is ironic given it's probably the one thing that might be the lifeblood that holds on to the leads continuing to flow through to your business and so on. I guess, John, coming in your direction, because I guess for me, the trade shows typically for our clients is quite often where they are showcasing products or services or
I think that's where they've got to kind of look at different methods of showcasing those products, showcasing those services. So, an investment or more of an investigation into things like augmented reality, because that's quite a nice way, particularly for a client who's, product based, to be able to kind of get across that tangibility of the product. We've seen it with certain clients that we've worked with before that, sometimes they can't shift the product across the continent, even in normal times. So being able to kind of digitize that experience, not only do you actually give someone the experience there and then, but also they can take it away and they can share it with the rest of the team rather than the one or two people who might go to the show. So I think that's kind of one way that people should certainly be looking more now. Yeah. And then the other one is looking to replace that face-to-face contact, because while, you can't replace it per se, you can digitize the experience to a degree. Now, whether that's through sales enablement, an investment in account-based marketing, it's kind of looking at different ways of reaching out and having that one-to-one contact with someone.
Yeah. And I think, because a lot of our clients and prospects obviously go to a lot of these trade shows to meet people for pre-arranged meetings. Yeah. And that can be press or it could be suppliers or customers. And nothing replaces a face-to-face. Nothing replaces being sat next to somebody. But to the same extent, proactively filling the void that's left by some of these exhibitions with virtual meetings of some kind where you can still showcase product portfolios and expertise or whatever it may be. And I suppose that's where the things like the different sales enablement softwares can come into play, and kind of bringing those to the forefront as well when it makes it so easy and quick to tangibly share the products and services overviews that you maybe would look to walk somebody through in person at a exhibition as well.
So, like, I know obviously a lot of the events that we're dealing with are, like you say, being postponed or cancelled. But I know there's one event in the UK that rather than doing either of those, they basically chose to switch it entirely online. So it's I don't know the correct term, but it's like a buyer's event. So everybody that's attending it is interested in buying ERP software. So they're all in market, and then the idea of the event is that they'd be basically presenting to, or they'd be presented to by lots of different vendors. And they're choosing to do all of that online. So the vendors will do all of their presentations through webinar, and then that's for those buyers to then make their choice. Obviously, it's key there that that's not postponed because those buyers are currently in market, and if they postpone it in 6 months' time, they'll need a complete different basket of buyers.
Yeah. I think it's interesting for the organisers and so on. And I mean, obviously, this is going way beyond just the sectors that we operate in B2B as well. I mean, the impact on the hospitality sector here in the UK will be, potentially devastating at the minute. And my wife works for a big hospitality company and a hospitality software company, and a lot of their clients and customers are already coming to them asking for financial support or it's the uncertainty that goes with it all that will create, I guess, the further concern. I've already spoke to the bank manager today at BDB, who's proactively ringing around all his clients to see how it's impacting us and other businesses. So everybody's trying to come across as being supportive, but then so I was trying to get rid of warnings off my screen here because I've had several Skype messages and then a warning off Zoom that we've got 10 minutes left, by the way. So bit different to podcasting normally, isn't it? And then my mum's trying to ring me on my mobile now. So it's all on the go.
Amazing. What a time to be alive.
What an absolute trio of events there. So yeah,
I think, Matt, I was just thinking, do you not think there's an element of, like you say, with the bank manager ringing and trying to kind of Dunkirk spirit, keep calm. But you don't think kind of if we do that, it helps the situation more than kind of the blind panic. You know, we've all seen the empty shelves of loo roll, the empty. Now red wine has gone off the shelves. I think trying to create a certain normality, I think helps people through it and actually almost begets a normality rather than.
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, and you don't want to be. I'm certainly not being dismissive of it. You can't dismiss the stats that are coming out and the numbers around it. But for me, you assume it will return to normality at some point, and we're not going to be sat here in 9 months on emergency food supplies or something. But who knows? But at this stage, when it does return to normality and the switch is flipped back on events and exhibitions and so on, particularly just thinking like that as the example that we keep using. Then if you have taken your foot off the gas or neglected it, then you're going to be so far behind the curve to start off again, aren't you? So I think you've got to plough on, assuming it's business as usual, and that in weeks, hopefully not months, but on months, the international travel bans will be lifted, and the peak in the virus will have all but disappeared. But I think until then,
there's the age-old. Yeah, those age-old sort of stats, aren't there, around the cost of acquisition, the cost of retention, and is it cost of acquisition is 5 times as much as retention? So actually, to kind of take your foot off the gas now.
Yeah. But for me, that really rings true in the sense of if you do take your foot off the gas and don't replace your existing marketing efforts that you would have done at the trade show, somebody else will be poaching you.
Yeah, so there's always someone ready to jump in, isn't there?
Closer to it.
And then the other one, other than trade shows, obviously, is sales meetings equally impacted with. Obviously, it's on a much smaller scale because it's often a one-to-one or a small number of people meeting each other. But they're being just as impacted with people either not wanting their employees to travel or the people that you're going to be meeting not wanting anybody to travel into their offices. So I'm supposed to be going to, in theory, a meeting in Amsterdam next week. Obviously, that's not going to be happening now because they don't want anybody to travel to them. And likewise, we're being advised not to travel unless it's absolutely essential. So that would just be a regular sales meeting rather than the trade show that's being impacted. So it's how do you maintain that contact, that level of connection in a situation where you are being disrupted. But like we said, you can't take your foot off the gas there.
No, I think that's it. When clients are asking us, other than we're just following the government's guidelines and the travel advice. Really, I think that's all you can do in terms of following the advice that's out there and seeing where you can get to with it, I guess, and then following the developments as close as everybody else is. But I don't think that the fear mongering and the panic tactics is going to really help anybody for the meantime. So the more of a normal environment we can create, I guess, the better, and that's our aim as a team.
I really hate the phrase because it's so overused these days. But keep calm and carry on, basically.
But it is that, and I think the advice to clients and people like us, of own and managed businesses, needs to be you're gonna have to think a bit differently, and you're gonna have to do things differently, and you're gonna have to think be as agile as you can with the circumstances that faces for the meantime, because you certainly can't sit back and just wait. Who knows at the minute? Who knows? I'll be interested to see if the podcast is being done like this next week or whether we're back in action. But I think it might be.
Or if in 3 months' time we're all like Howard Hughes walking around with shoeboxes on our feet.
But you don't know, do you? I mean, everywhere I've been is like a ghost town. I say I've just returned from Dubai over the last few days, and they locked down the airport, shut all the public restaurants, but formally locked down the place, shut all the attractions. Everything had gone. So it was an eerie feel to it. And even in the local village today, when I nipped out at lunch, it was equally. It's a strange feeling. But we'll see where we end up with it.
See where we end up.
Hopefully, you don't see me emaciated sat here in the chair in 6 months' time.
I'm going to end up with a beard about 8 foot long.
That's it. All I've noticed so far by working from home is a lot more remote meetings. My AirPods have need charging more than once. Interruptions by children, equally challenging to negotiate on several calls.
And that's only going to get worse if schools get closed, obviously. That'll be interesting.
That's it. So I'm conscious of the time. Has
Yeah.
anybody else got anything else they want to add in or mention on the topic for the meantime, or are we good?
Nothing for now, other than I'd encourage people to just keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
You know, the moment you do take your foot off the gas, it will come around and bite you tenfold, I think.
Yeah, similar to me, I'd say it's just a case of like, don't throw in the towel, because obviously things are a bit harder now. It's think about how you can keep going, how you can, you know, facilitate that level of personalization and kind of personal contact. And yeah, don't forget that's a huge and important element, and don't just try and wait it out. You might as well, whether it's a week or 3 weeks or months, you should, you know, keep trying to push things through in the meantime.
Sounds good.
You always get told, don't you, in marketing school, that every threat is an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, while it might sound a little bit tasteless, I think everyone should look at it that way and think, well, okay, if we are given this set of cards, how do we play them?
Yeah.
And can we do it differently? Can we improve?
Somebody will play them well. I think that's what you've always got to have in the back of your mind, haven't you?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for taking the time in these rather strange circumstances we find ourselves in. If anybody's made it this far in the recording, feel free to check out www.b2bknowledge.com for our online content hub, all ungated content available for our prospects, clients, and contacts to help you navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. And thanks a lot for the meantime, and see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.